unbelievable moment, she revealed, "I can't read," to the farmer, changing 10 lives forever. Sarah stood in the fading light of the autumn afternoon, the leaves swirling around the small porch like her racing thoughts. The worn-out paper in her hands felt heavier than it should. A letter from her son's school detailing the scholarship that could change everything. Her heart pounded against her chest, a frantic rhythm echoing her inner turmoil. What if it was too late? Just the thought of failing her children sent a jolt of panic through her. She had 2 jobs, working the diner that the locals adored and helping out at Glenn's farm. But the facade she maintained, cheerful, hard-working Sarah, harbored a grotesque truth. She could not read. As she flipped through the crumpled contents of her son's backpack, she could feel the walls of her carefully constructed life beginning to constrict. The letter beckoned for answers she didn't have. Confessing her inability to read felt like a ticking time bomb. What kind of mother hid something so fundamental? A sick feeling knotted in her stomach. Every word she couldn't decipher set a profound distance between her and her dreams for her children. She could imagine their disappointment, the confusion in their eyes, and the eventual quest for explanations. But the stakes were rising, and her mind buzzed with contradictions. Her children deserved a good education. But would they still respect her if they knew the truth? She could fight through her anguish, persist with the deception, but the burden of secrecy clung to her more painfully than any stitch she bore from the diner's hectic shifts. Each familiar face at the counter only served to amplify her unease. They praised her laugh while quietly igniting a sense of dread within her. What if someone found out? She could picture their pitying glances like daggers. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. After wrestling with her internal storm for too long, she made the choice that shook her to her core. She would speak to Glenn. Even as she approached the farm that evening, dread twisted her insides. There he was, bundled in his work clothes, the sun catching strands of grey in his hair, kind yet uncompromising. The man who instilled respect in the community, and whom she had placed on a towering pedestal. When she finally confessed, the air crackled with anticipation. Glenn's silence stretched, trapping her in a moment of torment. But instead of the judgment she feared, a look of gentle understanding crossed his face. There was no condemnation in his eyes, no withdrawal of respect. Instead, they glinted with empathy that ignited a spark of recognition within her. But tension lay coiled just beneath the surface. They were 2 people trapped in their own battles. Just as she started to process this unexpected kindness, a chilling ultimatum from the school arrived that would force her to confront her darkest fears again. The weight of the letter in her pocket felt like lead, a haunting reminder that the past was still a looming shadow over her future. As she grasped that thick paper, her mind raced with panic. She could almost hear the ticking clock of impending consequences echoing in her head. What would happen if she couldn't overcome her fear? Would it take everything away? The thought was paralyzing, and as her heart raced, she felt more lost than ever, teetering on the edge of an uncertain abyss. The silence hung thick in the air as Sarah waited for Glenn's response, her heart pounding a chaotic beat that nearly drowned out the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. It was as if time had frozen, the world around her fading into the background. For a moment, she felt suspended between fear and hope, her confession echoing against her own internal walls. Glenn's eyes softened as he studied her, and for the first time, she felt the weight of shared burdens. His past had its shadows, she knew, the death of his wife, the struggle to keep the farm afloat after. But rather than pity, she sensed an understanding that uncovered the emotional chasms they both inhabited. "Sarah," he said slowly, his voice steady, "it takes strength to say what you just did. Many people walk through life wearing masks, hiding their truths. But honesty, it can be liberating." His words pierced through the fog of her shame, igniting a faint spark of confidence. Could honesty indeed lead her toward a path of growth? She thought about her children, her desire to set an example, to show them the value of perseverance and authentic living. Each pang of fear morphed into a more profound realization. The real failure lay not in her inability to read, but in the facade she had built around it. "Thank you," she managed, her voice a whisper carried on the gentle evening breeze. "I've hidden this for so long. I don't want them to see me as weak." "Strength isn't about not having faults," Glenn reassured her, stepping closer, his presence comforting. "It's about acknowledging them and not allowing them to define you. We all have battles, Sarah. Some are just harder to see." In that moment, Sarah felt a surge of determination. It was time to confront her fear, not just for herself, but for her children. They needed to see that failure didn't equate to worthlessness. It showed resilience. But how could she embrace this truth when each letter represented a reminder of what she could not do? The following day at the diner, in the midst of pouring coffee and taking orders, a plan began to form in the back of her mind. Each customer became a checkpoint for her growing resolve. With the familiar chatter of locals around her, she mused over those letters she had long avoided. What if she learned to read, not just for herself, but alongside her children? They could help her, and in the learning process, she could teach them the importance of taking risks, confronting fear, and doing the uncomfortable work of personal growth. As she paced behind the counter, a fire began to ignite within her. What if she transformed her shame into strength? The thought was exhilarating yet daunting. Would she be able to face the challenges? A part of her was terrified of failing again, of restrictions she placed upon herself. Yet there was another voice nudging her forward. Each time she repeated Glenn's words in her head, acknowledging her truth, confronting her limits, it turned the fear inside out. Perhaps the real journey began now. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, the letter staring back at her under the dim light. She took a deep breath, inhaling both terror and possibility. With her children asleep nearby, she opened the letter and traced her fingers over the complicated characters that formed words she couldn't yet comprehend. The last vestiges of regret and shame began to rear back in her mind, but she pushed through, feeling more resolute than before. The next day, as she stepped into the diner, ready to embrace her intentions, her mind drifted forward. Who could she ask for help? Would she dare to reach out to the families of her children's classmates in the community? The idea spun in her head like a spiraling cyclone, exhilarating yet terrifying. Clarity washed over her. This was more than just learning to read. This was a reclamation of control over her circumstances, an act steeped in vulnerability and strength. But as she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of the diner's window, complacency brushed against her resolve like a cold wind. The question lingered. Could she fully commit to this transformational journey? The time had come to find the courage she needed. The next morning came cloaked in a veil of determination, yet uncertainty clung to Sarah like a second skin. As she moved through the familiar rhythm of the diner, each task was infused with a sense of purpose. Today, she would begin her journey, not solely for herself, but for her children, who deserved to see their mother model resilience. With every cup of coffee poured and every order taken, she could feel the weight of possibility pressing against her chest. Conversations swirled around her, the clinking of plates and laughter of patrons underscoring her internal dialogue. Who in this community might be willing to help? She considered the other parents she knew from school functions, the ones who rushed in each morning as she hurriedly dropped her children off. Faces she recognized but had never truly engaged with. Before, fear held her back, a silent barrier that separated her from reaching out. This time, she resolved to break through it. During her lunch break, she scribbled a note to herself on a napkin with trembling hands. Ask for help. Each word felt monumental. She was building her own foundation of courage, and the thought both exhilarated and terrified her. Thinking of Glenn's encouragement gave her strength. It had been a long time since she'd felt empowered to pursue something, anything, that felt so deeply personal and significant. By the time she finished her shift, the napkin felt like a talisman in her pocket. As she walked home, the world seemed to vibrate with newfound clarity. Colors appeared brighter, and the air felt charged with potential. However, as she approached the door, those familiar doubts threatened to swallow her whole. Would she be seen as just another person seeking help, or would they recognize the vulnerability it took to admit her limitations? Deciding it was time to act, Sarah took a deep breath as she walked through the threshold. The house was quiet, her children upstairs nestled in their rooms. She allowed herself a moment to regroup, pacing back and forth in the kitchen, her heart racing. She could envision herself sitting across from a fellow mom, revealing the secret she had kept locked away for so long. In her mind's eye, she imagined the questions they would ask. Why had she waited so long? What would they think of her? Her chest tightened with anxiety, the very thought of stepping into their world, becoming more than just the woman behind the diner counter, felt both daunting and empowering. Suddenly, a flicker of realization washed over her. This discomfort was part of her growth. If she didn't face it, she would remain stagnant, hidden in the fear that had defined her for years. She grabbed her phone, instinctively beginning to scroll through her contacts for familiar names. It was time to shed the past and embrace this new chapter. Just as she was about to reach out, the phone buzzed in her hand. A sudden notification alerted her to an upcoming PTA meeting. It was the ideal opportunity to connect with other parents in a structured setting, easing her in like a gentle tide. She felt something shift within her. An ache for connection mingled with the rising tide of determination. Perhaps she could introduce herself, share her story as a means of reaching out indirectly. If she could stand up in front of others, speak her truth, even just a little, wouldn't that be a step towards confronting her fear? Her fingers hesitated over the screen, the decision to participate igniting anticipation laced with trepidation. Yet right beneath that fear, there was resolve, the inescapable urge to transform this moment of vulnerability into strength. As she finally clicked attend, a new wave of trepidation rolled over her. Mixing thankfulness with uncertainty felt strangely exhilarating. The moment of stepping into the unknown was upon her, and with it, the weight of her choices hung heavily in the air. Would she find support among those who had likely faced similar challenges? The question lingered like a sweet promise, both daunting and thrilling. It was a leap into the unknown, an invitation to cross the threshold from fear into possibility. Would she rise to the occasion, ready to embrace the depths of her truth? With a deep breath to settle her racing heart, she whispered to herself, "I can do this." But just as she started to feel the rush of empowerment, a new thought struck her. Would the courage to reveal her struggles transform not only her life, but also those around her? The potential consequences echoed in her mind, leaving her teetering on the precipice of what was to come. She had entered the first steps of a journey, but was she ready to face the revelations waiting on the other side? The days leading up to the PTA meeting felt both burdensome and exhilarating. Sarah was consumed by a whirlwind of thoughts, often battling between confidence and self-doubt. Each morning, the weight of her decisions settled like a cloak on her shoulders. Flashes of imagined conversations haunted her, scenarios where she stumbled over her words, or worse, where no one seemed to care. But her resolve deepened as she prepared mentally. She borrowed Glenn's technique of visualizing success. Closing her eyes, she pictured herself standing in a small, brightly lit room, parents seated expectantly before her. In her vision, she spoke authentically, her voice steady, the very embodiment of the courage she sought to embody. It became a daily ritual, conjuring fresh confidence each time she rehearsed her narrative. On the day of the meeting, the air was thick with anticipation. As she entered the school's multi-purpose hall, a wave of shock coursed through her. The intricately decorated space, filled with faces, was a stark reminder of her battle with vulnerability. A low buzz of conversation filled the room, laughter and familiar voices echoing, yet feeling distant. Sarah drifted along the edges, clutching her notes, a sheet of ideas she had painstakingly crafted. A knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach as she surveyed the crowd. Kids darted around, giggling in a frolicsome manner, while parents exchanged pleasantries. Each friendly smile felt like a taunt, a stark contrast to her trembling hands. Could they see through her facade? Surely they would know that she didn't belong here, that she was merely an imposter amidst their laughter. Noticing a group of mothers near the corner, she took a deep breath. They were engaged in a lively conversation, sharing tips on parenting. The depth of their connection stirred something within her, an unrelenting desire to join in, to be one of them. But the fear clawed at her again. What if they found her dull, her struggles insignificant? The meeting commenced, and as the principal spoke, Sarah struggled to focus. Her mind spiraled, circling back to the same agonizing question. Was she strong enough for this? Then came a pivotal moment, the segment dedicated to open floor. A jolt of clarity cut through her fog. The urge to speak transformed into an almost desperate need. As the microphone passed from one person to the next, she realized this was her moment, and the gravity of that realization was both liberating and terrifying. With each heartbeat, her confidence teetered. The parents who spoke before her had shared challenges and successes, some even voicing their fears. As their experiences filled the room, she noticed the empathy and understanding in their faces. They were not so different from her. They had their struggles too, masked under their curated lives. When the microphone reached her, she rose, heart pounding. Each step felt monumental, the space between her and the group stretching endlessly as if she were moving through a dream. The thoughts racing in her mind congealed into a single mantra. I will not hide anymore. Hi, I'm Sarah, she began, her voice surprisingly steady. I've worked in the diner for the past few years, and today I want to share something that holds me back. I've been afraid to reach out for help because admitting I need it feels weak. As she spoke, an unexpected wave of emotion welled up, blurring her vision. She continued, detailing the isolation she'd felt and the fear of judgment. In that moment, she understood. Vulnerability was not a sign of weakness. It was an invitation for connection. The silence following her speech buzzed with a different kind of energy. The parents' expressions shifted as they absorbed her words. An understanding flickered across their faces, recognition born from shared fear. Would this moment spark something profound? A connection that reshaped her world and those around her? The question hung in the air, both exhilarating and terrifying, but she had taken the step. Just as she prepared to sit down, one brave soul in the audience stood up, her eyes glistening with empathy. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. You'd be surprised. Many of us have faced similar battles, and it's time we start talking about them. As the murmurs of support grew, Sarah felt something shift within her, a tug of camaraderie that began to forge the bonds she'd longed for. But underneath the warmth of that moment, a pulse of fear lingered. What more would she be willing to reveal? And would her newfound connections withstand the weight of truth? The uncertainty lingered, like an uncharted road ahead, twisting into the darkness of the unknown. The weeks following the PTA meeting unfolded like a series of interconnected paths, each one strikingly different, yet undeniably related. Sarah experienced a dramatic shift within herself after that night. She had spoken from the heart, revealing her vulnerability in a space where she had once felt like an outsider. This newfound recognition fueled a desire to embrace her authenticity further, and yet the fear she had brushed against still clung to her like a shadow, casting doubts whenever she ventured too close to the edge of her comfort zone. Returning to her routine at the diner, she hoped the strength she'd unearthed would translate into her daily life. But as she slid into her shift with a mechanical resolve, the old sensations crept back. The clattering of dishes felt louder. Laughter echoing from the booth she often served punctuated her awareness of being incomplete, still hiding from the depths of her potential. On a particularly hectic Saturday morning, while refilling coffee cups for a table of regulars, a new customer caught her attention. A farmer, visibly weary, but with kind, expressive eyes. He smiled at her, and she felt an inexplicable urge to connect. Aching for deeper conversation, she summoned strength from the meeting. "How's the farm this season?" she asked, catching him off guard with her genuine interest. He began sharing stories about the challenges of harvest, about the relentless storms and unpredictable market prices. As their conversation developed, Sarah found herself drawn in, her heart buoyed by their exchanged stories. Vulnerability on both sides. She listened intently, absorbing not just his words, but also the warmth of the connection they were forming. But steering the interaction took a surprising turn when he hesitated, glancing down as if lost in thought. "I've got a secret too," he muttered, the gravity of his voice striking Sarah. Intrigued, she leaned closer, prompting his confiding. "I can't read," he admitted softly, the words trembling between them. Time paused as Sarah processed his confession, an uncomfortable wave roiling within her. The familiarity of his fear resonated deeply with her own struggles. This unexpected bond offered both a revelation and an opportunity. Quelling her inner turmoil, she replied, "You're not alone in that. I've had my own challenges, but I'm learning to embrace them. Maybe we can help each other." A spark of understanding ignited between them. The farmer looked up, eyes widening with both surprise and possibility. "You'd really do that?" Their conversation deepened, bridging the gap between his struggles and her own. In that moment, the weight of her past felt lighter, the prospect of overcoming challenges daunting yet invigorating. The power of connection surged through her veins like a current, amplifying her resolve to reveal more of herself, to bring about change not only for herself but for others grappling with similar battles. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself drawing in other hesitant souls, like moths to a flame. A father struggling with his anger, a mother fighting anxiety, and others quietly hiding their own stories. Their communication thrived on authenticity, a network of shared vulnerabilities beginning to coalesce as conversations turned from small talk to deep discussions on mental health, self-acceptance, and community support. Yet, amid this flourishing connection lay tension. Sarah questioned her evolving role. Was she equipped to lead this kind of heartfelt dialogue? The gravity of her new position weighed heavily on her, shifting by the minute. Each voice she listened to echoed her own, a critical questioning of whether she truly deserved to facilitate healing for others when she felt so unfinished herself. Just as she began to navigate these complex feelings, a sudden realization loomed. The farmer had returned to the diner, but this time he was not alone. Accompanying him were several patrons from her newfound circle. Their faces bore a mix of eagerness and trepidation, curiosity and hope intermingling in the air. They had come to not just meet, but to join her journey. As Sarah prepared to engage them, an unexpected surge of fear enveloped her. Would she have the courage to continue leading the conversation? Would she falter under their expectant eyes? In that moment, on the cusp of revelation, a choice awaited her. Would she step forward into the uncertainty, risking everything to further uncover the hidden potential that emerged from vulnerability? The moment of truth seemed to stretch endlessly before her, pulsating with the possibilities of change, both for herself and those she now held dear. In the charged silence that followed the farmer's arrival with a small group of patrons, Sarah felt her heart race. The faces before her were familiar, yet the stakes felt alarmingly high. She had gently encouraged them to share their stories, weaving their collective pain into a tapestry of hope. But now their eyes were fixed on her, searching for strength, looking for a leader. The magnitude of that responsibility washed over her like a tidal wave, the fear of faltering at the forefront of her mind. As the din of the diner swirled around her, she could almost hear the unspoken question hanging in the air. Were her words enough? Did she possess the wisdom necessary to guide this ragtag assortment of seekers? Taking a deep breath, she shifted from the sidelines into a role she had long evaded. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice unsteady but finding its footing. "I know we all have stories that bring us here. The struggles we face are real, but so is the strength that we can find in each other." Her gaze swept over the group, anchoring her thoughts on each familiar face. This wasn't just about her, it was about them too. The farmer's encouraging nod ignited a flicker of confidence within her. "Let's begin by sharing what brought us to this table," she proposed, her pulse gradually calming. One by one, they opened up. The father recounted his battles with anger when his son struggled in school. The mother described her suffocating anxiety that had kept her from even stepping out to shop. Each confession unspooled layers of isolation and repackaged them into a shared experience. With each story, Sarah started to see a pattern. These individuals were not merely participants. They were amidst a complex web of connection. A realization settled over Sarah, one she hadn't fully appreciated until now. Healing often began in the act of being seen. As they spoke, a thought gnawed at her. What if she directly shared her own struggle? Could her vulnerability catalyze a deeper connection, inspire them to embrace their own fears? But doubt loomed large. Was she truly ready to expose that part of herself? The weight of her own admission felt precarious, tangled with the raw emotions of the moment. Yet, as the conversation continued, the pull of authenticity grew stronger. There was only so long she could lead others to the edge without peering over herself. With a deep breath, adrenaline coursing through her, she spoke. I understand the feeling of hiding. I've struggled with that too. For a long time I couldn't read." The words hung heavily in the air, reverberating inside her. Silence enveloped the group. Shocked gazes met her own, but confusion gradually morphed into understanding and empathy. The farmer, who had dared to share his own battle, seamlessly slotted her admission into the web they had been weaving. "You're not alone in this," he interjected, his voice steady, mirroring her earlier reassurance. "This just proves we're more alike than we think." In that moment, Sarah recognized the transformative power of vulnerability. She had opened a doorway not only for herself, but for them. As they continued their dialogue, the walls between them began to crumble. They were no longer just isolated struggles. They became a united front against their fears. But as the evening wore on, wavering thoughts crept back into her mind. Had she done enough? Was this newfound connection sustainable? Or would they unravel when faced with the world outside? Each of their confidences was a fragile gift that required nurturing, and she was uncharted territory in this role. As they prepared to leave, the shared smiles held a promise of future meetings, but also an unspoken challenge to maintain this momentum. Her role as a guide had begun, but the path ahead loomed uncertain, filled with potential pitfalls. "Let's do this again," she said, her unsteady conviction met with a chorus of agreement. Each person left with renewed hope, yet Sarah remained rooted to her spot, gravity pressing down on her thoughts. In that moment of reflection, an undeniable truth struck her with clarity. The journey she had begun was not just about connecting to others, it was about confronting her own fears head-on. Yet another question loomed large, an echo in her mind. Could she lead them effectively, or would she falter when they needed her the most? As the last of her group exited the diner, Sarah stood there, resolved to explore what type of leader she could become, yet conscious of the fragile nature of her own resolve. The challenge of nurturing this connection weighed heavily on her shoulders. There, in that diner, her evolution was gradual yet unmistakable. She was no longer merely a reluctant participant in her life, but a burgeoning leader facing her own uncertainties. As the door swung closed behind the last patron, a flicker of dread surfaced within her. What lay ahead for her journey and the bonds they were forging? Would she rise or fall when truly tested? The answers awaited her, and with them, the choices that would shape not just her own life, but the lives of those she had dared to touch. The hum of the diner faded, replaced by the ticking clock on the wall, each tick a reminder of the fleeting time Sarah had to solidify the connection she had started to forge. She leaned against the counter, staring into the remnants of the coffee in her cup, her heart still racing. While the others had left their stories on the table, she had yet to truly unpack her own. The vulnerability she had shown felt both liberating and terrifying. Would they see her as a leader, or merely a reflection of their own struggles? The quiet enveloped her, pressing against the corners of her mind where doubt lingered. Did she have what it takes to guide a group? What if her own past consumed her? These questions spiraled, weaving threads of anxiety into her thoughts. She inhaled deeply, deciding the best way to channel her turmoil was through action. A plan began to take shape. She would create a framework for their next gathering. It had to be intentional, a safe haven for them. Yet another idea struck her, a small workshop focused on skills where everyone could grow together. But as she sketched the vision in her mind, a nagging worry emerged. What if they weren't ready? What if they fell back into their struggles, isolated in their homes, unable to break the cycle? She had built a connection, but could she maintain it? The next day, she scribbled ideas in her notebook while sipping her coffee at the diner. The sun streamed through the window, bathing her in a warm glow, igniting a fire within her. She brainstormed practical techniques that could foster self-expression and growth. A book club, storytelling nights, and perhaps even writing sessions. Each idea unlocked a renewed sense of purpose, yet she couldn't shake off the fear of failure. Could she facilitate such activities? Would they feel safe opening up again? The mere thought of shattering the fragile bond they'd created tightened her chest. Eager yet hesitant, Sarah acknowledged that leading them would require her to delve deeper into her own past, unpacking her experiences further than she had before. Determined, she pulled out her phone and began typing a message to the group. she proposed a follow-up meeting, laying out her vision while emphasizing the importance of their ongoing connection. As her fingers danced over the screen, she hesitated, her thumb hovering over the send button. What if they didn't want to come back? What if her vulnerability had only planted seeds of pity rather than empowerment? With those thoughts storming through her mind, Sarah hesitated, wrestling with her impulse to share her ideas. In that moment, a new insight struck her, a profound revelation about her own leadership. Maybe the ability to lead didn't start from a place of unwavering certainty. Perhaps it could originate from a communal journey fraught with uncertainties. Vulnerability was part of leadership, not a flaw. With a renewed sense of conviction, she pressed send. As the message zipped off into the digital ether, a different kind of fear crept in. What if they accepted her invitation? The thought invigorated her, yet spun her mind in circles. She stood, pacing the diner, her heart racing with anticipation. Would they really come back to share in her vision? The clock ticked steadily, marking the moments until she would know. The dread of the unknown loomed large, but at the same time, excitement bubbled beneath, threatening to spill over. Hours melted away until she began to see familiar faces through the diner's glass door. One by one, they entered, flooding the atmosphere with hope and hesitation. As they settled in, Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline course through her, igniting the dormant leader within. She welcomed them, each greeting tightening the web of their shared experiences. This time, they were not alone, they were allies. As their eyes met, each blink held an unspoken promise, growth, connection, and discoveries that awaited them. Yet, as they sat there, laughter and banter circling the table, Sarah's mind flickered towards the darker corners. What if her choices ultimately drove them apart? What if she failed to ignite the spark of connection she so desperately wanted to foster? As she stared into the faces before her, the gravity of her mission became clear. The challenges lay not just within them, but also within her. The turning point was approaching, a moment where her resolve would be tested against her deepest insecurities. Feeling the weight of their expectations, she knew she needed to confront the shadows of her past to genuinely lead them into whatever lay ahead. The journey of possibilities was just beginning, but with it came the certainty that the path wouldn't be smooth. And with that thought, an unexpected twist struck her. Were she and the others ready to unearth not only their triumphs, but also the ugly truths that they kept buried? As the conversation swirled around her, an enticing question hung in the air, waiting for an answer. In this pursuit, the depth of their stories had only begun to surface, and what awaited them all was still cloaked in uncertainty. Would they confront their demons together, or would they retreat back into the safety of silence? The moment for revelation was at hand. The laughter in the diner faded slowly, intertwining with the uncertainty hanging thick in the air. A delicate balance had settled over Sarah and her group, a sense of camaraderie punctuated by an undercurrent of fear. Every smile exchanged masked deeper stories, but Sarah knew this gathering offered a rare opportunity to illuminate those shadows. "All right, everyone," she began, her voice steady, pushing through the internal surge of doubt. "I've been thinking a lot about our next steps together. We have so many stories that shape who we are, and I believe we can use those stories to strengthen the connections among us." The nods around the table were tentative but encouraging. Sarah could feel the pulse of hope amidst the anxious expressions. Somehow, they were all searching for the same thing, an avenue towards healing and growth. But she needed to dig deeper. "I want to propose something different," she said, her heart racing as the next words formed. "What if we started with a simple activity, storytelling? We'll each share something that feels meaningful or even daunting. I think laying down our truths could help us begin to navigate the bigger challenges we face." At that moment, she caught a glimpse of a familiar face, a woman with teary eyes and a quivering lip. Sarah recognized that fragility, reflecting the turmoil she too carried within. This was why she was here, to foster a space that transformed those vulnerabilities into strength. "Storytelling? I'm not sure," came the hesitant voice from the back of the booth. It belonged to Jenna, someone Sarah had noticed withdrawing into herself during previous meetings. Vulnerability was hard for Jenna, a truth that resonated within Sarah. Jenna began again, her words spilling out in hesitant rhythms. "I've never told anyone about my struggles with reading." The collective inhale from the table was palpable. Sarah's heart sank, both for Jenna and for the realization that many shared unspoken burdens. What would it take for them all to feel safe unearthing their stories? In that moment, Sarah felt the gnawing doubt creep back in, yet Jenna's voice steadied as she continued. "I've lived in fear that people would think I'm uneducated." The room shifted as her confession broke through the silence with raw honesty. "I can barely read, and I've never had the courage to admit it." Sarah could see the mixture of relief and anxiety etched across Jenna's face. Buoyed by Jenna's bravery, she decided to push her own boundaries further. "If I might share," she said, inviting Jenna to wield her own narrative once more. "I find writing terrifying sometimes. When I was younger, I was always afraid my words weren't good enough. But I pushed through because that fear was simply a barrier I wanted to dismantle." A wave of recognition passed through the table, igniting generous murmurs. Confessions began, each story revealing layers of struggle and success. One after another, voices that had long been quiet rose to fill the room. Tales of job rejection stemming from insecurities, moments lost to depression, and battles fought quietly beneath the surface. With every heartfelt story, the essence of their connection deepened. Sarah could feel her pulse quicken, sensing the atmosphere shifting from one of trepidation to gradual empowerment. How astonishing that her own fears were met with acceptance. In this moment of vulnerability, she recognized a fundamental truth. Growth was inherently entwined with shared stories, raw and unfiltered. Yet as she observed, a stark realization loomed. She felt their weight upon her shoulders. They had opened up to her, bridging gaps she was afraid would remain untraversable. Could she, as their leader, bear the responsibility of guiding them through these shared fears without faltering herself? Then just as laughter blossomed again, a shared reflection of comfort, Sarah's thoughts spiraled back to her own unresolved shadows. What truths from her past would she have to face to lead them further? As the stories continued to flow, a question emerged within her. How far would she go to help them delve into their truths? The pursuit of personal honesty would demand even more of her, not only as a leader, but as an individual learning to confront her own past. Would she summon the courage to share the hardest parts of her journey? With that uncertainty stirred within her, the echo of the moment flickered to life. Their connection was forging, but the true test awaited just beyond the horizon. A hesitating fear knotted in her gut as she realized the next gathering would require a step into uncharted territory, where the shadows of their shared stories would merge and reveal what lay underneath. Were they all truly ready for that? The week felt like a pendulum swinging between anticipation and dread as Sarah prepared for the next gathering. The thrill of seeing real connections forming was overshadowed by the weight of her own unresolved truths. Each day that passed, she wrestled with a decision that gnawed at her. What part of her own story would she lay bare to help others unearth theirs? She stumbled through the confines of her own mind, questioning whether sharing her past vulnerabilities could genuinely serve the group. What if the stories she told acted more as barriers than bridges? Pushing back against every instinct that told her to hold back, she began jotting down snippets of her experiences in a small blue notebook, moments filled with fear, self-doubt, rejection, and ultimately, her gradual climb toward understanding her worth. The evening of the gathering took a stark turn. As the group filtered in, Sarah's breath quickened at the sight of Jenna, who had been hesitant before. The glimmer of resolve reflected in her eyes bolstered Sarah's courage, but it also crystallized the fear that demanded to be addressed. Would she too be offering strength, or would her truth derail everything she had built thus far? She opened the floor, inviting everyone to share their stories. Jenna's voice echoed first, confident and clear. "I've been reading a lot lately, and I'm starting to feel proud of myself." Each word forged a path of empowerment, rekindling hope throughout the room. As others followed suit, Sarah felt an incredible shift. They spoke of their journeys through difficulties and celebrated milestones previously marred by insecurities. One story linked seamlessly to the next, creating a tapestry of shared experience. A lively discussion burst forth, full of laughter and relief, as they found humor in previously crippling fears. But even as their connection stirred her soul, Sarah felt the pull of her internal struggle intensify. She leaned back, longing to be part of their collective healing while grappling with her own impending revelations. Could she bear the risk of sharing the parts of herself that felt unworthy? This was the moment she had sought. Yet the fear of vulnerability shot through her like an electric jolt. It was at that instant her pencil met the paper again. "I need to tell my truth," she thought, but the words felt heavy and muddled. Every story shared crystallized their journeys, but her own felt locked away in the shadows, foggy amidst the clarity of others. As she listened to those building each other up, each heartfelt connection caused her own walls to tremble. Could the truth ever set her free too? When finally Sarah's moment came, the air stilled. "There's something I've held on to for far too long," her voice wavered, but she pressed through. Unraveling the intricacies of her own fear of failure and the sting of rejection, she watered the seeds of bravery they had all been cultivating. On that night, she crossed a threshold. "I still recall the moment I had to come to terms with my own limitations. My insecurities as a writer nearly consumed me." Sarah shared stories of rejection letters strewn across her kitchen table and nights spent staring at a blank page, believing she would never find her voice. Each confession peeled back layers of her past, revealing not just the shadows but the light that emerged from confronting them. The room responded with a new energy, one pulsating with authenticity as the group rallied together, many reflecting on their own fears. This shared moment became the genesis of something unbreakable. They were woven tighter by the wordless acknowledgement of their struggles, evolving from self-doubt to resilience. As the gathering drew to a close, Sarah felt energized, yet uncertain about the next steps. She caught a glimpse of Jenna, who had transformed through the evening, her newfound confidence evident. "What's next?" echoed silently in her mind. The connection they had nurtured that night brought forth an undeniable question. What else could they face together? As they departed, Sarah could see flickers of determination ignite in others. However, she also sensed another weight rising. What truths awaited them in their next conversation? The prospect awakened her. The promise of confronting deeper histories loomed beyond the horizon. Would they dare step further into the tumult of their shared narratives, or would fear reclaim its throne? The days following the last gathering felt charged with expectancy, yet tinged with uncertainty. Sarah sensed a palpable shift in her group, their gradual evolution from fear to an almost electric curiosity about one another. But with that transformation came an undeniable challenge: how to cultivate that sense of connection while deepening their vulnerability. As she prepared for the next meeting, determination coursed through her. She jotted down ideas in her notebook, inspired by the authenticity they had all shared. The themes of hope, courage, and openness highlighted the potential rewards of honest communication. Her plan was clear. They would focus on confronting their fears, but also it was time to set goals. If they could identify what they wanted to overcome as individuals, then they could collectively support each other on those journeys. On the evening of the meeting, Sarah stood at the front of the diner, her heartbeat steady with excitement and purpose. As familiar faces gathered around the table, she exuded a confidence born from her own recent confrontations with vulnerability. She welcomed everyone, feeling the collective energy pulse through the room, a tapestry of stories woven with threads of strength. But before jumping into their discussions, Sarah shared her vision. "Let's take some time tonight to set personal goals," she began, her voice steady. "What do you want to accomplish? What fears do you want to tackle? I propose we each write something down, then we'll support one another as we work through these goals together." The ensuing silence buzzed with the weight of possibility. She could see glimmers of enthusiasm mixed with apprehension on their faces. Jenna was the first to speak, her voice laced with excitement. "I want to read a chapter book to my daughter by the end of the month," she declared, affirming the progress she had made. A wave of applause erupted, motivating others to share. One by one, stories poured out, a parent wanting to regain the confidence to apply for a new job, another hoping to reconnect with a sibling after years of silence. Each aspiration echoed their inner struggles, but also revealed an unyielding resolve to change. As they penned their goals on paper, Sarah felt a remarkable sense of unity envelop them. Collaboration thrived, the energy in the air spurring them on as they exchanged tips and encouragements, patting each other's backs against the daunting tasks ahead. Overhead, the old diner clock ticked by, marking the transition from isolated struggles to collective triumph. But Sarah's heart quickened. She realized she hadn't yet shared her own goals. It loomed like an unfinished task, an unsaid truth burdening her spirit. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. I want to finish my first short story, she admitted, feeling both vulnerable and empowered. I haven't shared this goal with anyone before. It feels terrifying, but I want to confront that fear and finally see my words come to life. The atmosphere shifted, thick with understanding and support. Beneath their shared laughter, an unspoken promise lingered that they would all hold each other accountable, universal desires intertwining into a single quest for growth. There was magic in revealing their hopes, in standing together. Yet behind that warmth, Sarah couldn't shake off a lingering fear. What if her own journey didn't lead to the success she hoped for? Would her vulnerability serve as an invitation or a point of ridicule? The delicate weight of her truth hung heavily on her, a pendulum teetering on the edge of potential. A week passed, and Sarah poured herself into writing. Each stroke of her pen became both liberating and daunting, unraveling the story that had long been suppressed. But as her words flowed, doubts crept in, whispering that failure was merely one misstep away. Feeling the pressure mount, she reached out to her group after several sleepless nights. Scheduling an extra meeting, she wanted to share her progress, to connect with the shared fear of inadequacy. When they arrived, she could sense their collective anticipation. "Let's talk about our challenges," Sarah suggested, her voice wavering only slightly. The room shifted, all eyes keenly focused on her. "I think we need to be honest about how we're feeling, both about our goals and the difficulties we're facing." Conversations ignited, each person revealing frustrations, moments of doubt, and challenges they confronted in their pursuits. Each story shared built bridges of support as they collectively vied against insecurity, reminding one another of their determined spirit. Amidst their discussions, Sarah realized her own trepidation seemed lighter in the face of vulnerability. This wasn't just about her fears, it was about the whole group, about how they could cultivate resilience together. The realization infused her with conviction. The interconnectedness of their journeys illuminated her own path. Over time, word began to spread about their meetings, and new faces started trickling into the diner, drawn by curiosity and the promise of connection. As the group expanded, Sarah felt the daunting shadow of leadership swirl around her again, but this time it was welcomed, a necessary part of her evolution. Each new member brought fresh stories, reminding her that intention laid the foundation for transformation. With each gathering, members began to celebrate personal victories. Jenna told of reading to her daughter with eagerness, while others recounted new job interviews or moving past family boundaries. The environment morphed into a sanctuary of growth. As Sarah shared her own progress on writing, a miracle unfolded. Her colleagues became her sounding board, pushing her to deepen her narrative while holding her accountable to face her fears. They became more than allies. They were integral to her journey, a surprising twist that solidified her growth as a leader and a storyteller. When the final draft of her story was polished, she felt a whirlwind of emotions swell within her. It represented not just a piece of writing, but a testament to every member. Every word encapsulated the essence of connection, vulnerability, and shared stories. The surreal verdict hung in the air as they gathered, flanked by excitement and pride. As she unveiled her story to them, Sarah felt a cascade of relief and hope unfold. She wasn't just sharing words, but a lifetime of experiences that resonated within all of them. The echoes of laughter and tears intertwined as her journey matured beyond anything she could have envisioned. In that moment of authenticity, Sarah realized her worth, not for her ability to lead alone, but for the connections they had all fostered through their collective bravery, understanding that true strength blossomed when vulnerability was embraced. As that knowing settled deep within her, she felt grounded, yet spirited, a reflective confidence washing over her. They had created a community dedicated to overcoming their fears, and she was proud to be a part of that confluence, the determined spirit extending far beyond her initial struggles, lighting pathways for genuine transformation in each of their lives. As the night came to a close, Sarah made a silent promise. This group was more than a fleeting moment. Together, they would delve further into uncharted territories, ready to confront the shadows and navigate the challenges ahead. Each new obstacle would just be another opportunity to celebrate growth, and she would stand firm beside them all, eager to witness their journeys unfold. It was a beginning, an unmistakable evolution, and in that realization, Sarah found not just her voice, but her purpose. Knowing now more than ever, the path to true fulfillment was not just personal victory, it was shared resilience, a collective triumph over darkness that paved the way for brighter tomorrows. Now it's your turn. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. We want to hear from you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Let's show the world our strength together.